Okay, back to basics. All of the issues we talk about on this channel and all of the opinions that you see here are based on one very simple concept. You cannot have the right to take another person's rights away. If you believe that one person can have the right to usurp another person's rights, what you are actually saying is that you do not believe in rights. Instead, you believe that certain people should be able to confiscate the property and limit the freedom of other people based on who controls the government. That is what you believe. And that most certainly is not a right by any reasonable definition. I say based on who controls the government because government is the vehicle for jailing people who fail to turn over their property to those who have been designated as more deserving of the fruits of their labor than they are. The idea of positive rights, that some people are entitled to extract by force the property of other people, would be laughable if it hadn't done so much damage to the human species. Why has it been so damaging? 3 basic reasons. 1, as I've touched on previously, it's illogical, meaning that it lacks sense or clear sound reasoning. If rights are universal, meaning everyone everywhere has the exact same rights no matter who they are, then you have the basis for an ideology with integrity and consistency that is a sound foundation for organizing a society. If instead you believe in unequal, so-called positive rights, which is in point of fact not rights at all, but privileges granted through the initiation of force, then you have a society based not on rational thought, but instead on the whims of whatever group or person happens to be in power. As humans, our only evolutionary advantage is rational thought. Without it, none of us would be here. So you have to wonder, why are we organizing our social systems based on irrational thought and illogical concepts when this kind of thinking is the exact opposite of what got us where we are today? Reason number 2, the idea of positive rights is immoral. Societal morality, as opposed to individual morality, must be objective, or it is dependent entirely on subjective opinions and leads inevitably to the subjective opinions of some being imposed on others by force. Societal morality must be able to be determined by reasonable thought and fact, and cannot be subjectively determined either by the collective or by divine insight. It must stand on its own, and it must exclude the initiation of force. Positive rights, that is the so-called right to violate someone else's rights by confiscating their property, rest on the idea that rights as an independent entity do not actually exist. Instead, advocates of positive rights argue that rights are not universal, not applicable to everyone, no matter who they are, and are instead bestowed on individuals by whatever form of government happens to exist at the time. Positive rights by their nature are an attack on the individual, most frequently by the collective, that violates individual rights to life, liberty, and property. It is an illogical attack, it is an immoral attack, and it is, as proven by history and statistics, a dysfunctional attack, which brings us to reason number 3 that positive rights have been damaging to humanity: dysfunction. Reasonable people would assume that the government enforces positive rights in an attempt to make things better for people, not worse. Unfortunately, today, the number of reasonable people is dwindling fast. But if the assumption of good intention is true, we now know, beyond a reasonable doubt, that by enforcing positive rights, government makes things worse for people at all levels of society: rich, poor, middle class, all of them. Positive rights are the very bedrock of restricted market society. So-called rights to things like jobs, housing, medical care, things which must be provided by other people through the initiation of force, create warped incentives that in the end, every single time, end up harming the people they're supposedly designed to help. This has been mathematically proven in modern economics to the point that it provides a statistically sound basis for sociological planning. Implementation of positive rights also provides a statistically sound basis for planning, but only if your objective is to create more poverty, misery, and death. So even if positive rights were logical, which they're not, even if they were moral, which they are not. There is the statistical fact they do not work on planet Earth if your objective is to improve the human condition rather than damage it. It's a disturbing sign of our times that more and more people have managed to disconnect themselves from reality to such an extent that damaging the human condition is actually their purpose. It would be great if we could limit the advocacy of positive rights to this deranged few. Instead, it's adopted over and over again by people who should know better, but are, in the vast majority of cases, just too emotionally invested and intellectually lazy to bother examining how much harm they're causing.